and it's going to go through, W is going to take the successive with 3 words. And so you can make a loop by reading some data, splitting it, then writing a for loop, and then it's effectively going through the words in that line of data. And so that's a really powerful concept that we'll use in a lot of the programs that we're going to write. Just a couple of bits about this and how it works. Split with no parameters here, it looks for spaces, but it also treats a bunch of spaces as a single space. And so it's pretty smart about that. And so even though this has a lot of spaces between lot and of, you only see lot, of, all the spaces are gone. It does something special about spaces. It's really white space, so tabs or new lines or other characters would also qualify in split, basically. Now, you don't always have to split based on spaces, and a lot of data that you're going to run into, you're going to want to split on something else. And so here's some data that looks like we're using colons to separate the first, second, and third piece. Now, if you just call split, split's looking for spaces. And so split gives you back a list of the things broken apart with spaces, but there's not a single space in that line. And so we get a list. See, it's a list, but there's only one item, and the semicolons are sitting there. Split doesn't go like, whoa, this looks like it should be semicolons. You know, split's job is to use spaces and split the string based on spaces. Okay? But given that this is something we like to do, you can tell split what character you'd actually like to split on. Now, it's not quite as clever when splitting on something other than spaces. It doesn't understand that, you know, if there's a bunch of semicolons in a row, it still thinks of those as splitting points to split. But in this particular case, where there's no spaces, you know, and it's going to split that. So it says split this based on the semicolon, instead of being based on the space. And so if you take a look at what comes out of this, we split on semicolon. Now we have a 3-item list, and we get first, second, and third. And a lot of your data comes out of some logging system or some router status updates. Who knows what you're looking at? But the delimiter is often something other than space, and you can do that with split. So this is a useful thing when parsing things like our email address, right? We wanted to get things like the email address, this second piece, off of the line. And so we can use split to take advantage of this. And so here's a little loop that's just going to print out not the email addresses, but instead the day of the week. We're going to print the day of the week out for all these things. How do we do that? Well, we can observe really quickly that if we split based on spaces, it's the 0, 1, 2. It's the 2 position. So we can quickly write a bit of code that, you know, opens the file, then loops through the lines. We do this all the time now. Strip takes off the end of the new lines. We can check to see if it starts with from space, right? From space is our key, so we're ignoring all of the lines that don't start with from space. But then we find a line that starts with from space, and we split it, and then we just print out the second word. And so we get the second word of the lines that start with from, and that's how this thing works. Now, sometimes we want to dig into it deeper, and we will take something, split it, and then split another piece of it again with a different delimiter. And so let's just say that the thing that we want to achieve is getting the part after the @ sign for email addresses. And we did this with, again, find and pose and stuff like that, but you can use split to do this as well. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take this line, we're going to split it based on spaces, right? Chop, 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 chop. And the fact that there's an extra space there doesn't matter. Split happily just like zooms through that. And then words sub 1, 0, 1, 2. Word sub 1 is this email address. So we'll put that in a variable called email. And so email will be a string that's just this. So in 2 lines, we've pulled out this second address into a variable. Then what we're going to do is we're going to re-split that. We're going to take this string we've got and split it based on @ sign because we know it's an email address. So we get a new set of pieces. The first part is the person's name, and the second part is the host name that their email is hosted on. And then what we can do then is we just happen to know that this is the 0 item and this is the 1 item, so we can get at that. So the interesting thing of going here, if you think back to how we did this before with find and pose and all that stuff, it's really a lot cleaner, and we don't for me, I can look at this after you understand it, and it's easy for me to understand that it's correct. Whereas that pose stuff, you got to add one and start the second find after. Just remember that. And this is a lot cleaner way. And this is a more typical way of pulling this kind of information out of a line. So in this chapter, we've talked about lists. We've talked about the concept of collections. That's our first data structure. We're not just doing algorithms. We kind of know algorithms now. But now we're going to do data structures. And this chapter and the next two chapters are our foundational data structures. And then we'll, like everything, we'll make more complex data structures by composing those data structures together. We've looked at how strings and lists connect together and how split works, and these are all really powerful tools that we're going to use going forward. Now we're going to take a look at how we would write some code to do some parsing, read some data. As a matter of fact, we're going to read through our famous mailbox data, look for lines that begin with from space, and extract the third word. As a matter of fact, we already have some of this code already written. We're going to debug it. We're going to look at code and we're going to debug it. And so here we go. Here we have it, and it's a pretty basic program. It opens a file, loops through the file, throws away the white space, splits it into words, and checks to see if the 0th word, the first word, is from, and if it's not, we skip and read the next line. And otherwise, if we find a line that starts with from space, then we print the third word, which is word sub 2. Okay, so this is what we've got, and we carefully saved this file into the same folder that we've got, ex08. And so let's go ahead, cd desktop Python for everybody, ex_08. And so this is some files. We got our day of the week Python in our inbox short, so that's sitting there, okay? And so let's run this program. This is the program that we've got right here, Python 3 dow.py, and it doesn't work. Now, by now you've seen a few tracebacks, and there you go. So, you know, when you look at a traceback, you think to yourself, well, I made a mistake, and you've gotten pretty good at looking at that line. So there you are. You're like, this is the line. There must be something wrong on this line. And you want to change it. But that line's not actually the problem in this particular thing. And so you got to be careful sometimes. And one of the things that you didn't notice in this one right away is that it actually worked. It printed the first line out. So if we take a look at our data set, it found the line started with from space, it split it, and printed out the third word. And it blew up later. And so part of the problem is that we don't know what it was doing when it blew up. And so the first thing I'd like to do in this kind of a situation is find the line and make sure there's a print statement right before it. And so I'm going to print words, colon, and then comma WDS. I want to print right before the line that blows up, so that I know really when this finally does blow up what was going on in that line. So I'm going to run it again. And did I forget to save it? No, I forgot to save it. Look at that. See the little blue dot? Forgot to save it. So now we see a whole bunch of output, and we see that it's actually doing a whole lot of work before it's blowing up. And so you see that it prints the words out from that first line and prints out Saturday, which is exactly what we expect. It's the third word in the line. And then reads a whole bunch of stuff, and it's actually, what's doing now is ignoring. Let me just put something here. I'm going to say print ignore, so I can keep track of when these lines are being ignored. So let's run it again and have the word ignore pop up, right? And so it's doing a lot of ignoring. It finds these words, prints out Saturday, reads this line and ignores it, reads this line and ignores it, reads this line and ignores it. So a lot of stuff's going on here that you might not realize. And so we have to take a look at what the problem is. And so it is now blowing up word sub 0, and now we can scroll down and we can look at exactly what happened right before the traceback. So we really now know exactly what happened before the traceback. And the interesting thing is that there is an empty string. empty array. There's an array with 0 items. So I'm going to print the line out too.